So you want to start a podcast? Well, I'm about to show you how to get up and running rather quickly without any expensive or complicated setups or equipment, just exactly what you need to get started to get your voice out there and hopefully grow this into something much bigger for you. Here's exactly what we're gonna cover in 6 different parts. Part 1, we're gonna talk about the essential equipment that you need. Again, we're gonna keep this as simple as possible for you. Next, we'll talk about some software that you're gonna need to record and capture your voice. Some of it's gonna be free, others that you can upgrade to later down the road. Then in part 3, we're gonna talk about your show strategy. What are you gonna say? How long are you gonna record for? How often should you publish? We're gonna answer questions like that for you so you know how to approach this thing as soon as you start making this happen. In part 4, I'm just gonna do a brain dump of a ton of tips for you as you record and as you edit. These are things that I've come across over the past 15 years since starting my podcast, so I just wanna pour that into you so that you don't make those same mistakes that I did. In part 5, I'm gonna show you exactly how to get your podcast up on all the major platforms so you can have the best chance to be found by the most people. And in part 6, we're gonna talk about video podcasting. Should you publish your podcast right here on YouTube as well to get more views and what's all entailed with that? We'll talk about that and more. For now though, a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, Buzzsprout. They're there to help you with your podcast. We'll talk about them later in one of the steps. Just want to plant that seed because they're amazing. This is Buzzsprout, plant that seed because seeds sprout into plants and then bees buzz on them. Okay. Anyway, quick cred check before we get started. My name's Pat Flynn. I've been podcasting since 2010, which is a very long time. I went from nervous beginner to now expert who has helped thousands of people all around the world start their own podcast as well, and I hope to add you to that list too. I've had multiple podcasts. I've had over 90 million downloads across all of those shows and over 2,000 episodes recorded, so I've done this thing for a very long time. And the podcast has been the #1 way that people have discovered and found my brands, and it's also turned into so many more business opportunities, and I've even won a podcasting award at one point, which is pretty cool. And no, this mic does not work. I think the coolest thing about doing all of this is I was not a great communicator. I was not a natural speaker. Podcasting has turned me into a great communicator, and that's what it could do for you too. Now, since starting, I've taught tens of thousands of people how to start their podcast. I've even helped people like Tim Ferriss start his podcast as well. All that to say, you're in the right spot. So feel free to watch this video all the way through first and then go back and then kind of take it piece by piece as you build, or you can just hit pause as we go and kind of build it with me. So if you're ready to begin, awesome. One suggestion I have is to download our podcast cheat sheet. It's like a prep guide, a checklist for you so that you can kind of follow along and make sure you have all the things checked off. So you can go to smartpassiveincome.com/podcast cheat sheet for that. I'll mention that at the end again, but let's get started with part 1, your equipment. All right, so if I were to ask you, what is the #1 most important piece of equipment that a podcaster needs, what would you say? If you said microphone, then you are absolutely right. A microphone. Even if you're doing a video podcast, which again, we're gonna talk about more toward the end, a microphone, the audio is the most important thing because many people will watch a bad video with good audio, but many people won't watch a great video with terrible audio. So just keep that in mind. There are many different kinds of microphones that you could choose from, some ranging from, $2 that you can get on like Temu, all the way up to thousands of dollars in professional vocal microphones. But I'm gonna give you some suggestions that are just gonna make it super easy for you and really economical. Starting with this microphone right here is called the Samson Q2U. And this would be my #1 recommendation for you if you're just starting out. Why? Because #1, it is actually very cheap, relatively speaking. It runs about 70 to 80 bucks. And more importantly, it just plugs in via USB and it sounds great. If you wanted to go more pro, you would need some other boxes and amplifiers and all these other things that are just gonna cost way too much. And again, my goal here is to help reduce the amount of friction for you to get started and get behind the microphone and get your voice out there. So Samson Q2U, we'll have all the links to everything mentioned here in the description, by the way. But let me give you a quick demo of how this sounds because it actually sounds really, really good. Just to give you a little bit of a baseline, this is the sound coming from my MacBook Pro microphone, which is not gonna be great at all. You wanna upgrade that, and again, the Samson Q2U is gonna be fantastic. So let me plug that in now. Now you're hearing the Samson Q2U, which again, for most normal people, this is gonna sound very professional, so I just wanted to give you an example. Now, you could upgrade to some other mics. There's some mics like the pod mic here. I'm not even gonna share them with you because you honestly don't even need that right now, so don't even worry about it. For now though, the other thing you have to worry about, however, is your plosives. If you don't know what a plosive is, it's when you have B words or P words or other words like that that just send air into the microphone. You want to block that. And how do you do that? Well, there's 2 different ways. A lot of times you'll see podcasters use things like this and they connect it to their desk or something and it kind of just blocks like a windscreen or a pop filter. I don't know the difference between the two, but it's like this thing, I don't want this in front of my face blocking my screen or something. So I'm not going to use that. I am going to use, however, this is what I'm going to use though. Just a foam ball. little hat, and it's ready to go. And now the plosives and the P's and B's are just going to sound perfectly fine. So there you go. That's all you need. But it's kind of troublesome to kind of hold the microphone the whole time. However, there are podcasts that do that, and that's fine too. But if you don't hold the mic perfectly, it might change the sound, of course, and you want to keep your microphone in front of your mouth as much as possible. So how can we ensure we do that without having to hold it the whole time? Well, that's where you get a boom arm. That's what they call it. And boom, it's a boom arm. And this is really cool because it connects to your desk. I'm going to do that and show you right now. But again, this just lifts it off the desk for you. You'll also notice this thing here. It's called a shock mount. This suspends your microphone sort of in the air with these bands so that you don't get any vibrations from your desk as well. So I'm going to set this all up right now, and it's going to just take a moment. Hang tight. And there we go. It's already set up. Now the cord's kind of dangly here, and you can wrap it around, and there's some other fancier boom arms that you can get that have like ways to kind of manage your cables. But all that to be said, as you can see, I'm moving my arms now, and again, you just don't want to bang into it as much as possible. So you might need to move it around a little bit, but it's just something that's going to take some getting used to, and once it's set up once, you're kind of done. And that's all you really need for equipment other than a computer to record into. But now let's talk about the software that you're going to need to get started to record your voice into. All right, and we don't need this anymore. We switched back to the mic that's right off the screen here because we're going to talk about software. Now, software is really key because you need somewhere to record your audio into. And in general, you could pretty much do this for free using a bunch of different kinds of software that's available to you. Number one, if you're on a Mac, I would recommend starting with just GarageBand. It's often built into your computer anyway, or you can download it for free. And it's what I used for 7 years to run my shows. So a lot of people will say you'll need to invest in all this expensive stuff. You don't. Just use GarageBand. I'm not going to go over a tutorial on how to use GarageBand and how to edit in it. In fact, you can find those tutorials linked to in the description because I have full-on tutorials about how to do that, but that is an option. If you are on a PC or even if you're on a Mac and you're just not a GarageBand fan, I would recommend using Audacity. If you have the audacity to check it out, then use the link again in the description. It's a free tool to use. And again, I have another separate tutorial on how to use that as well. Sorry with the dad jokes. It's just who I am. Now that covers software for when you're recording yourself, but what do you do if you were trying to record somebody else? Well, if they're in the room with you, you could either share the same microphone and just pass it back and forth, or connect a second microphone and go from there. But what if you want to record with somebody on the other side of the world or on the other side of the country, which is a smart thing to do. This opens up so many different opportunities to connect with other people and gather their information for your show and your audience. But how do you do that? Well, there's a few recommendations I have for you. If you want to go easy and right from the get-go, something like Zoom can work really, really well. Yes, it's also going to record the video, but you can take out the audio and just get the MP3 file from there that you can drop into your editing software, and you can go from there. Here's why I don't prefer Zoom. Zoom is going to compress the audio a little bit. And that's, again, as a podcaster, you want the best audio quality as possible. So if you do want the best audio quality, where would you go? I would actually recommend a tool called Descript. And they have something called Descript Rooms that you can use to bring people into a virtual room to then record. What's nice about Descript also is it's an editing tool that will AI transcribe all of that for you, and then you automatically have the transcript. It's such a great tool. Again, all these links are in the description below, but Descript Rooms, there's also tools like Squadcast if that's available, and Riverside, as well as there's a plethora of different options you have available, but check out Descript Rooms to record interviews remotely. Those are the software options for recording, and guess what? Those are also going to be the same places where you edit your show as well, whether you just edit from the recordings that you do there or you drag and drop from elsewhere. Maybe you get like an audio file, musical jingle, something like that. You drag and drop it into these things as well, and you can move them around. You can slice and dice things around. Again, we have tutorials for all of this, so I'm not going to get into the details here, but that is where you would edit. Now, there's a few things I want to mention with editing before we move on to your show strategy. Number one, you want to make this as simple as possible for you. I remember when I started out, I wanted to edit out literally every single mistake, every breath, every You want to minimize that as much as possible, or it's going to be a pain in the neck to edit your shows. Let some of those mistakes in, as long as it's not like a 20-minute pause, then you can just remove that, let it be. Secondly, you're gonna also feel inclined to add a bunch of sound effects and music and background and stuff, and those things do add a lot of flavor to your podcast as well, but again, in the beginning, it can take a lot of time to figure out how all that works. I would go minimal first and focus on the content that you're creating, not necessarily the decoration around the content that you're creating. The last thing you want to do is make sure that your audio files, after you're done editing them, are normalized or mastered. That means sounds that are kind of lower level come up so that people can hear it, and sounds that are too loud or too high come back down, and everything's kind of like exactly where it should be for the listener. Well, how do you do this? Well, I used to have to worry about all these other external tools or making sure I listen to every bit of it to make sure they match. You don't have to do that anymore, especially when you use a tool like Buzzsprout. Buzzsprout is in fact where you would go to upload your show. I'll show you how to do that later. But they have a tool built in called Magic Mastering, which just literally does that all for you when you upload your episodes. It's literally like magic. So shout out to Buzzsprout. Again, we'll talk more about them later and when to get involved with them to start to host your show and distribute it. But they do that for you. So again, you won't even have to worry about that. All right, we are now into part 3, which is where we start to determine your show strategy and fill out your show details. You're gonna wanna make sure you keep track of this stuff, whether it's in a notepad or our cheat sheet or something, to make sure you have everything so that when you get your host set up, like Buzzsprout, you can just copy and paste everything over there and you'll be up and running in no time. So, number 1, your show name and show concept. Coming up with an idea for your show can be one of the hardest things, but I'm just gonna let you know. The more you worry about it so much, the more that you just kind of waste time flip-flopping between different ideas and different formats and stuff, it's more time that you're leaving on the table to potentially get out there, build an audience, and connect with people. So eventually at some point, you're going to need to make a decision. And I would recommend to try by the end of the day today to nail your show title and your show concept. So first, let's talk about just your show in general, and especially your show title. What is it gonna be? What is it about? You wanna brainstorm and think of a bunch of things, and don't try to nail it right away. In fact, I would recommend using tools like, this is called a Post-it note. Just write down as many ideas that you have about your show name, show title, what it's gonna be about. Just let it all out there. You don't have to perfect it right away. You can get all the ideas out on the table and start to kind of imagine what it would be like and narrow it down to a show concept and a title that you like. It may very well be inspired by other podcasts that you already listen to, which is great, but you also wanna make sure that you add your own flavor into it, your own spin or positioning so that it definitely stands out amongst the crowd. If you have a brand already, you might as well name it just your brand. Tim Ferriss, who has The Tim Ferriss Show. And that's okay too. By the way, the decision you make now can always be changed later. You don't want to keep flip-flopping back and forth, so it's important to think about this, but it's also not a permanent decision either. It's important to make a decision so you can move on and get this thing out there. I would also think about a subtitle for your show as well. This is sort of like the difference between a book title and the book subtitle. Very often, the book subtitle is actually what describes who this is for and what it's about. And I would encourage you to spend some time thinking about not just the title of your show, but what's the descriptive tagline going to be so that if you were literally in an elevator with somebody, you could elevator pitch it to them and they would be curious about it. Thinking about who ultimately will listen to this and what it will do for them or what they're gonna get out of it is gonna be a good guiding light for what that could be for you. Next, I want you to come up with 5 to 7 different keywords that are related to this podcast of yours that you're thinking of creating. This is gonna help you explore this topic even more, but you wanna write these down because you wanna copy and paste these into your hosting providers so that they can feed these to the directories, and the directories will know exactly what kinds of things your podcast is about. Google will also help bring people to your podcast. And the more that you understand these keywords, the more that they can be incorporated into the work and also just in the metadata behind the scenes for the directories. Now, here's the thing about podcasts that are very underrated often, and it's one of the most important pieces of your show, and that is your podcast description. Many potential listeners will read your podcast description on a directory before they hit play on any of your episodes. Yes, your title and the artwork together can help convince a person to click play, but the description and connecting to people in that description is gonna be really important. Also, including those keywords in the description will help too. You wanna come up with 1 to 2 paragraphs that really help a person who's brand new, who's just discovered your show, what's in it for them, and a little bit about yourself and what you have to bring to the table too for them. You can use tools like ChatGPT or Claude or other AI tools to help you develop this, but it's really important that you do really, really good copy here because this is your kind of one and only chance to convince a person to click play on your show if they're just discovering it for the first time. And then finally, you wanna have some time to think about your podcast artwork. This is like the thumbnail on a YouTube video. It's the one and only visual that people have related to your show, and you'll want it to connect to the show title as well as what it's about. Now, this can be very difficult to do, and you might use tools like Canva and some of the tools that they have available to help you build this, or you might even think about hiring a designer who specializes in podcast artwork. There's a lot of places to get podcast artwork designed, like Fiverr or even Upwork. I'll leave that up to you, but the most important thing is that it can be readable or legible at a small pixel count. It needs to be when you upload 3,000 by 3,000 pixels. However, you want to also shrink that down and discover whether or not it's still readable at that very small scale. The reason is because people are often discovering your podcast where? On their phones, on a mobile device, on small, tiny screens. A big mistake I see a lot of podcasters make, and even my own students have made this too, is using cursive handwriting and a lot of small little details that literally get lost when it's scaled down. So you want to make sure that although you're designing it at a big scale, 3,000 by 3,000 pixels, it looks good small too. That's going to help you a lot. Here, I want to talk really quick about royalty-free music. If you're thinking of including music in your show, maybe in the intro or even throughout, you'll want to make sure that you are allowed to do that. If you just take your favorite song and put it in there, you will get in trouble. There are tools out there that discover and kind of look out for that. So don't do that. I've had a friend even get permission from a band to use their music in their podcast, but then eventually they changed record labels. That record label came after them, and then they had to turn off their show. That just was not cool. So be sure you're using royalty-free music. There's a lot of music libraries out there, like artlist.io is one of my favorites. Audio Jungle is there too, and you can have the license to be able to use that in an intro or in your podcast. But you can also get music created at places like musicradiocreative.com. Their specialty is creating music and jingles for people like us, podcasters. Finally, before we move on from kind of your show details, let's talk a little bit about what you're gonna talk about. It's really important that you actually consider your future episodes and the topics that they're going to be about, and or the guests that you might want to have on the show. Even if you haven't reached out to them yet and they said yes, you want to think about what is your show actually going to look like? Because so far we've just been talking about the packaging or the gift wrapping around it. We want to know what's inside the box. So a great thing to do at this point is to challenge yourself to come up with 10 to even 25, or as much as possible, really, different topic and show ideas. You don't have to nail the title of these episodes yet, but you want to kind of have an understanding of what you're about to get into. Because let's say you do this and you have struggle coming up with 5 different topics to talk about. Well, when you get to episode 5, it's going to be a struggle to come up with more episodes. You want to have a backlog of ideas, and you can prioritize them and rank them later, but you just want to have a understanding of what you're kind of going to talk about on the show or what you're going to be discussing. So yeah, make sure you do that. Okay, before we move on, I want to do a lightning round of frequently asked questions at this point in the process, right, about your show. Number 1, how long should your episodes be? The actual answer to that is just as long as it needs to be to deliver the value you want to deliver, right? Don't talk more than you need to if you've already said what you needed to say, but also don't cut things short if you haven't gotten there yet, right? In general, however, the length of your show is going to be truly up to you. Maybe it's a quick tips, Quick and Dirty Tips. That's a series of a podcast, actually, that they have 5 to 10 minute episodes, and that's their thing. That's their unique selling proposition. Others go in depth and have episodes that are hours in length because they want to go deep with the person they're interviewing or the topic of discussion. Next, how often should you publish your podcast? Well, this is going to be partly up to you and what's available to you as far as time, right? You don't want to say you're going to go daily when you just literally do not have that much time to edit and produce your show every day. However, that is possible, and there are people like John Lee Dumas who've been able to figure out that system and have done very well with that. However, on the other hand, there are people who've published an episode like once per month, but people can't wait for them because those are the most in-depth episodes that just people cannot wait for. It is really up to you. However, I would suggest starting weekly. Try to get into a weekly rhythm because that's going to do a few things for you. Number 1, it's going to force you to figure out the systems to create this thing and stay consistent. And you have more opportunity to learn and grow from the mistakes that you'll make over time, from the data that you get from your audience that you're building and the things that they're saying about what they like and dislike. And the numbers are going to grow as well when you go weekly versus something like bi-weekly or monthly. So if I were to suggest a rhythm at the start here, it would be weekly. Lastly, what's the best strategy for interview shows versus solo shows? Again, it's your show. You could do literally kind of whatever you want except use non-royalty-free music. So it's up to you. You can do a completely solo show where it's just you, and that's positive because you can be very authoritative. It's you. You are building a connection personally with the audience that you're building, which is great. The downside of just doing interview only is you're leaving out the opportunity to make these genuine, real connections with people who are in the same industry as you, other experts. And I'll tell you, a lot of my friends now in the industries that I'm in are a result of initial conversations on my podcast. So you'd miss out on that if it was just yourself only. Now you can go interview only, which again, the benefit of that is all these connections that are happening, and you just need to become a really good interviewer, which means digging deeper, asking the right questions. You're not supplying the content, but you have to guide the content to where your audience wants to go. The downside is that the conversation and spotlight is not just on you. In fact, it shouldn't be on you as the interviewer. It should be on the person you are interviewing. So it can take a little bit more time to build authority by having guests on all the time. So maybe the perfect mix, and this is what I do, is a mix of solo episodes and interviews. Is it exactly 50-50? No, it's not 50-50, but I kind of just make sure that whatever I'm creating, whether it's myself or myself in a person I'm interviewing, is delivering the value that we want to deliver to the audience. That's the most important thing. So understanding who it is that's listening is going to be maybe the driving factor for you with kind of how to structure your show, who to have on, and how often it should come out, all those things. All right, we just finished a lightning round of FAQ about your show. We're going to do another lightning round because I want to give you as many tips as possible to help you as you go along. These are going to be ranging from recording tips to editing tips and all those kinds of things in between. So let's dive in with tip number 1, which involves this guy right here, the microphone. Where the microphone is very important, right? You don't want it up here. You don't want it over here. You want it in front of your mouth. And with this microphone and many microphones, you want to be pretty close to the microphone. I would say probably 4 to 5 inches. And you can experiment. That's the other thing. If you're not sure, test. So record yourself, try it, record yourself again, try it until it sounds just right. But in general, you want to be pretty close to the microphone, and it takes practice. As you are getting into the podcasting space, especially if you're doing an interview show, you're going to be paying attention to a bunch of different things at the same time. Your guest, the questions you're going to ask, the microphone, the sound levels, all these other things happening all at once. You're going to forget. It's going to take practice. You're going to make mistakes, and that is okay. And that is my second tip. Don't get too stressed out about all the things. There are so many things to think about, but once you get into the rhythm and you practice this, you're going to get much, much better over time. The third tip that I could probably give you, which also relates to the microphone, is before you hit record, make sure you hit record. Make sure it's going. I cannot tell you how many times I've recorded solo episodes, 30 minutes, an hour in length, only to realize that I forgot to hit record. It's probably going to happen to you at some point, but have some little checklist that you go through before you hit record. And again, you don't have to be perfect on the microphone too. That's tip number 4. While recording, just hit record and get through it. Mistakes and everything are going to be recorded. The magic happens in the editing. So I used to record where if I made a mistake, I would stop, erase everything, and go back to the beginning. That's how I thought it had to be done. But no, the magic happens in the editing. If I make a mistake, I always know I can go back and take that out later, and the listeners won't even know the difference, right? Tip number 5, which relates to making mistakes. If you are on the microphone and you happen to make a mistake, to help you find that mistake later, you could do this. Clap twice. I like to click my mouth like this. Why? Because in the sound waves or sound forms in my editing tool, I could see those big giant clicks that I made or those double claps. And I could just go right there and know that I had just made a mistake. So I don't even have to listen to the thing right before that. I know I can cut that out. So that creates a marker in the audio for me to go back to so I can edit that out later, and just makes it very clear and easy. I've gotten to the point where when I make a mistake, and then I pick it up. See, I just did it again. I can go back to where I left off and then just know to take that part out later. So again, those little clicks go a very long way. Tip number 6, when you are recording your podcast and testing things out, make sure that your audio levels are never in the red. What I mean by that, and you'll see this little meter here on the side of me, is when you're recording, if you are too loud or it's too hot, as they call it sometimes, or you're clipping, these are all different phrases for the audio is in the red, which is not good. There is no coming back from that. You cannot kind of in post edit kind of soften that. It's always going to sound crackly, and it's just not a great listening experience. You're better off being more toward the green, the safer side, and then you can move things up in Magic Master later using Buzzsprout to make those things nice and clean and at the right levels. Yellow is kind of where you want to be with your audio if you want just the best sound, and you make sure that you just don't clip at all. Tip number 7, and this takes us to your editorial planning. That means your content and kind of how far ahead you get. So number one, you do want to plan ahead. That is the strategy, because what you don't want to happen, and this is very common, trust me, you hit publish on an episode you've just done and you go, oh my gosh, I have to figure out what next week's is about. That's a very difficult state of mind to be in, because you are feeling like you're on this content hamster wheel the whole time. As long as you're like 2 or 3 weeks planned out and you know what those next episodes are going to be, a few things happen. Number one, you don't feel the rush and the anxiety as soon as you hit publish on an episode. Number two, knowing where things are going, you might be able to already start planning or finding research or having other people work on things related to that episode that you're going to record the next week. And that's a really nice feeling, to know that you're not starting from scratch every single week, but you have something kind of in the hopper or planned. Tip number 8 is to actually have something ready, recorded in the hopper. And this means batch recording or batch processing. This is how the professionals get ahead, and how you can get ahead and have some space in your life by actually recording more than one episode at a time, or having maybe a week where you record 3 and now you are 2 weeks ahead because you're publishing one this week. And this is how you can get more space in your life. This is how you can plan your schedule. In fact, what I love to do is I have Tuesdays and Wednesdays be my recording days. I know when I wake up on Tuesday and Wednesday, that's when I'm recording as many podcasts as I can. That's when I schedule interviews, all these things, which allow me to then know that, well, Thursday, Friday until next Tuesday is going to be free and I can work on other things. And I can really hone in on my podcasting on those 2 days. So pick a day of the week. Maybe that's your day to record and even edit as many shows as possible so you can get ahead. Tip number 9, on your podcast episodes themselves, get to the point as quickly as possible at the top of your show. Back in the day when podcasts started, it was very common for a podcast host to talk about what they had for breakfast, or talk, to their spouse for 10 minutes at the front of the show before actually getting into the content. Unless you already have a strong relationship with your audience, that's not going to matter, right? People are wanting the thing that they are clicking that you promised in the title and or what the show is about, right? So get to it, right? This is something that's very, very important if you're doing YouTube videos, and if you're doing video podcasting, that's important as well. We'll get to that toward the end. But even on an audio only podcast now, you want to let people know why they should stick around. You want to get to what I like to call the magic moment. And that magic moment is when a person is on their phone, they're about to go on a run, or they're about to go on that drive, and they're going through your podcast show. They hit play to just hear a little bit about what that episode is about. And they're like, yep, that's the show I'm going to listen to. And they put it in their pocket. And then you got them for 30 minutes, an hour, however long. It's so powerful. And it starts with the hook at the beginning of your podcast. So focus on that. Come up with different variations until you find one that can get really sticky, opens up loops for them and says, hey, here's what's coming more toward the middle or end of the episode. You'll want to make sure you don't miss out on that. Why should they listen? Answer that right at the top of your show. Number 10, use the power of your voice. And consciously try to get better at using your voice to convey these stories, or to ask questions, or to interview. Your voice is very powerful. Unlike writing, which is sort of monotone in a way, your voice can get really soft. And that adds a different flavor to that moment in the episode. Or boom, you can get really excited. And of course, you want this stuff to be genuine, but you can see you can change the dynamics, the flow, the rhythm of your voice, and actually move people. When you move people, people will move with you. Tip number 11, just 2 more before we move on to actually putting your show together. And I'm going to show you just how we do that in Buzzsprout. Storytelling. Podcasting, whether it's audio or video and audio, podcasting is the platform for storytelling. So get really good at storytelling. Pay attention to stories that you pay attention to, and ask yourself, why was that so intriguing or interesting? What kept me on the edge of my seat? How did time pass by so quickly while listening to this person speak or talk? You'll want to incorporate a lot of those storytelling tactics. I'm not going to get into those tactics here, but it is something that I've studied and continue to study, because that is how you hold people's attention, and that's how you connect. When you connect emotionally, now you are able to combat all the other noise that's out there and all the AI and all the information out there. You're connecting on an emotional and human level with powerful storytelling. So learn how to tell powerful stories. At the same time, if you're interviewing somebody, this is tip number 12, learn how to extract those stories from the person you're interviewing. You want to be a collector of stories. So how do you do that? My best tip for you is, when you're on a podcast with somebody, You want to get them to the point where they're just free flow speaking about their thing and you just listen. It's very difficult, in fact, for just a podcast host to just listen because we want to interject. We want to ask other questions. But what question can we ask our guests to get them into that free flow storytelling state? Well, quite simply, you can just say, tell me about a time when blank. Tell me about a time when you've invested into a business and it just didn't work out. Tell me about a time when you had a tough moment with your spouse. And then you just sit back and let them speak. Tell me about a time when blank is so powerful. So go ahead and use that. Lastly, try to find the fun. Podcasting is such a rewarding platform, especially if you're doing interviews with other people and all the relationships that could be built. Find the fun in all of it, because it is. Now, it's not going to always feel fun. The editing part maybe isn't the most fun part of the process, and the setup in the beginning, thankfully, Buzzsprout makes it so much easier for us now, but it is often troublesome for people who just are afraid of technology and scared of the whole thing. Again, I'm going to show you really quickly how to do it. It's going to be very simple, but find the fun in it. A lot of this stuff just has to be set up once and then you're done. And then it's just about recording these episodes, getting better at storytelling, connecting with other people, listening to your audience on what they want to learn next, and then coming on a show and addressing that. Even getting your audience involved can be a great thing. Collect questions from your audience and then address them on the podcast itself. This is your show. If you aren't having fun with it, make it fun. That's probably my best tip, because after doing this for almost 16 years now, it's just the most incredible thing ever. And I'm so excited for you. I'm actually jealous that you get to go through this whole thing again. It's like, I wish I could watch Back to the Future for the first time again, and I can't. It's just really sad. Okay, part 5. We're gonna get a teeny weeny technical here, but not too technical. We're gonna show you how to get your podcast up and running and in all the directories that you wanna get into. And it starts with our sponsor today, Buzzsprout. I've been recommending Buzzsprout for years, and it's where you want to go to host your podcast. Because technically, yes, you could host it elsewhere. And it's not, I'm not just saying this because Buzzsprout's awesome, but like, you literally want the best and easiest way to do this, right? So Buzzsprout's the way to go. You need to host your files, your audio files for your audio podcast on a server and host like Buzzsprout to then distribute out to all these other places. And here's why this works so well and why it's cool. Because it's not like YouTube. If you're doing a video podcast or any videos, after you finish editing your videos, you upload them to YouTube and then YouTube distributes it. But here's how podcasting works. This is why the setup is key. You finish editing your podcast episode, you upload it to Buzzsprout, and then you're done. Buzzsprout distributes it to Spotify, to Apple, to all the other directories. Once it's set up, everything's connected, you just continue to upload to Buzzsprout, and then you're done. That's how it works. It's not like YouTube with individual files for the platform. It's Buzzsprout serving it out and distributing it to all the platforms that you need to. So let me show you how to do that right now. So to begin, you'll want to go to smartpassiveincome.com/Buzzsprout. What's really cool about this is if you go through that link, you'll get some credit that you can use toward your account. So let's check out Buzzsprout. So first thing, just hit Get Started Free, and you're gonna wanna sign up. And as you can see here, it says, we love Pat Flynn, referred by Pat Flynn. If you see that there, thank you. But we're gonna sign up, and I'm just gonna go through the process really quick here. I'm not gonna go through the initial setup, which we've all seen on other products before, but I'll see you on the other end of all this. Now, when you get to this point, it says, which best describes you? I'm a new podcaster, or I've already built a podcast. If you're a new podcaster, obviously click that. I think if you already have one, this allows you to easily import your other show into Buzzsprout, which is just done very simply. So if you already have a podcast or you're rebooting one from days ago, you can already do that one, and then you can just kind of add on to that. But I'm gonna hit I'm a new podcaster and kind of pretend like I'm starting one for my Pokemon channel, or maybe Card Party. Card Party is my event where I bring Pokemon people together. So let's just pretend we're creating a Card Party Pokemon podcast. So I'm gonna create the podcast title there, Card Party Podcast. Maybe the Card Party Podcast or the Card Party Show. There we go, the Card Party Show. I'm gonna add a little bit of a description, and then we're gonna move forward. All right, got the description, and I'm gonna hit done. Let's start podcasting. And again, all this stuff can be changed later. What's nice here is there's a podcast setup process. It's just gonna take you step by step. So from here, let's add our artwork. So I'm gonna scroll down, select file. You can even design it through Canva right here inside of Buzzsprout, which is cool. But I'm gonna find our Card Party logo. There it is. And Scroll down. Now, this is where you're going to pick your podcast category. You'll want to select one that makes the most sense for you. So for me, it's going to be probably kids and family. There's also some optional other categories you can add as well. You want to make the most obvious one the first one, and then your secondary ones from there. Let's do TV and film since it's Pokemon, as well as fiction. Why not? And again, you can always change these later here in Buzzsprout. Time zone, we're going to go Pacific. This is so that when you schedule your podcast, it's scheduled at the time that you want it to. Artist, Pat Flynn. Don't keyword stuff here. This used to be the case for a lot of people. It'd be like Pat Flynn, Pokemon, Nintendo, Game Freak, like adding all these keywords in there. If you do that, then Apple will take your podcast out of the Apple podcast directory. So don't do that. Just put your name or your brand name or whatever it might be as artist. And again, you can change that later. And if you do have explicit material, you can click this so that it's actually categorized as such, and you'll be in accordance with the guidelines for Apple and other directories. All right, I'm going to save that. Podcast has been updated. Fantastic. I'm going to go back to the Buzzsprout homepage here. And now I'm going to upload my first episode, which is pretty insane. We're already here. And at this point, if you already have your first episode recorded and edited, fantastic. For now, I'm just going to put a small audio file that will act as if it were an actual episode. Again, we've talked about what your episode should be like. Episode 1 could be more of an introductory one. You can put a few more in there as well as you'd like so that there's more to listen to when you launch. But I'm going to click to upload an episode and just pop a file in here. All right, so while that's uploading, I'm going to come up with an episode title. So here for episode 1, I'm just going to put episode 1. Some people like to do EP1, or maybe it's because it's the Card Party Show, it's CP1, or just 1. Honestly, you don't even need that because there are ways to categorize into episode numbers down below too. But it's up to you, and depending on where it shows up, and again, you can always change this later. But I'm just going to put an introduction to the Card Party Show. Who are we? And then a description. Now here you have 4,000 characters, and there's a lot of tools out there that can take the audio and turn that into a summary or description that you can include. I believe Buzzsprout at the pro level has tools that allow you to do that as well. Descript will allow you to do this too using some of their AI tools if you're using Descript to edit. Whatever the case may be, you want a description of this, again, particular episode, not your podcast. It's going to be related, obviously, but this is the description for this particular episode. A person might read this and be curious about it and maybe hit play. So you want to think about this as, in a way, sales copy for the episode itself. You can also include links and resources and other things in there because people will see this on some of their apps and be able to potentially click on those things and get more information about that episode and the things that you're talking about. So I'm just going to put some placeholder text in here, and then we're going to move on. From here, I'm going to scroll down. I have episode artwork. This is going to default as the same artwork as your podcast, but you can actually include separate artwork for every individual episode. I know some people who, when they have a special guest on, they include their face in the artwork for that particular episode, and people will see that on their device. Now, real quick, we didn't talk about this before, but you could potentially have seasons of your podcast. Seasons make more sense for things like fiction, where there's seasons of like a story that you might see on Netflix, for example, but there are education and information-based podcasts that are also based on seasons. Why? Because they just want to take a break in between certain moments of time and then have like 10 episodes related to a particular topic, and then the next 10 episodes are about a particular topic. Again, you can structure this however you want. I will say, however, that if you choose to take a extended period of time to break between seasons, you will lose some listeners. The consistency of showing up and building a relationship with your audience is key here for building those loyal super fans, and you lose that in between seasons a little bit, especially if you change the story a little bit. But it's up to you. You might need those seasons to just recoup, maybe batch process those episodes, and then they come out on a more sequential basis after. Again, it's up to you. I'm not going to include a season number here, but I am going to include episode 1, and you can include tags and other things as well. Maybe you have different hosts, and you can change the artist name for that particular episode if you want. You can link to various websites that you have as well. Buzzsprout will create websites for you for your show too, if you'd like. I'm going to hit save episode details. And there we go. There's even a player in here as well. I'm going to hit play. This is from my other podcast, so it's not actually related to Card Party, but. All right. I'm digging the feedback that I'm hearing about the new format of the. Okay. Anyway, it's working. So there's a player here that you can then embed on your website if you have one. Really, really cool stuff. Now, this episode is not live yet. I could schedule this if I wanted to. I could hit publish and then it would be live. In order to submit to directories, however, you have to have at least one live episode. You can't submit your podcast before you have live episodes. So just keep that in mind. Now, just because it's live, you don't have to worry about a bunch of people finding it right away. That's going to be up to you and sharing it on social and getting it out there in the directories and then feeding people that link later. But you'll need something live, and maybe that is just a little preview episode or a introductory episode. You can do that however you want, but I'm going to hit publish on this and we'll see what happens next. All right, congratulations, your episode is published. Fantastic. And now I have what's called an RSS feed. And this is the most important thing when it comes to how podcasts work and your host with Buzzsprout. So I'm going to close this window. Now, the way this was done back in the day is you had to actually sign up to each of those individual directories. You had to create an Apple account, which you still will likely have to do, but you'd have to go to all these different places and submit that RSS feed. What's really nice, again, about Buzzsprout is it's just kind of all in here, and you can submit just right through Buzzsprout. So we're going to go to directories, and you can see here it says, complete this checklist to get your podcast listed in podcast directories. Check your inbox to verify the email address. So let me go do that now. Here's the email. I'm just going to click verify email. And here's what's cool. So far, we haven't even paid for anything, and we can get our podcast up in these directories from here, which is really neat. I would recommend, however, after a little bit of a trial and playing around with this a little bit, I would highly recommend paying for a plan here on Buzzsprout. Why? Because you'll be able to save all of your podcasts on here and they won't disappear after 90 days. And you'll also have access to a bunch of other tools too. Now, what's really cool is the magic mixing that happened has already happened. It happens automatically. You don't even need Pro for that. So you can at least get up and running and started. And then after you get up and running, you can get a plan and kind of continue moving forward. I just wanted to mention that really quick here. But now that we have this episode up again, I'm going to go back to directories and look at this. I have everything I need right here. Now, if I wanted to go and actually get my RSS feed and do it the old school way, I can click on RSS feed, and this is my link right here. This is the magic link that you want to copy and then give to all the directories if, again, you needed to do that individually. You don't need that. You can do it right here. Directories, get listed on Apple Podcasts, and then just follow those directions. Spotify, get listed, just follow those directions. Every different directory has its own different set of directions, and Buzzsprout just lays it all out for us. So again, thank you to Buzzsprout. They've been amazing, and they will continue to update this dynamically as more directories come about and as new instructions change. They always keep this up to date for us. That's how you get on the different podcasts, and then you'll see it on Apple Podcasts. Now, it's not going to show up right away, because remember, these podcasts, they kind of ping that RSS feed every once in a while. So give it time once you run through it. And again, if you need any help and support, Buzzsprout is there to help you. They have some of the best customer support when it comes to this podcasting stuff, and they want you to succeed. That's what I love about them. They're just so friendly. So if you need help, go ask them. Okay, so if that was a little technical for you, again, Buzzsprout's got your back, and it's so much easier now than it's ever been before. So you can get through that, and what's nice, again, is once you have that set up, then just every time you record a new episode, you just upload it to Buzzsprout, just like I showed you, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about anything else related to the directories. They will show up there automatically. Okay, now let's talk about video podcast. Video podcasts recently have made a huge run and have become very popular, especially as more people are using YouTube for a longer form type of content, whether it's in the background or they're literally using it like a podcast player. So really exciting because YouTube has an algorithm that allows you to be found more than if you didn't utilize YouTube. But adding video is a whole nother ballgame. So let's talk about this. Video, of course, is a great platform for connecting, just like we're connecting right now here on YouTube. It has the algorithm behind it to find new people, but you have to now film the video. You have to edit it, and it's just like editing another completely separate thing, even though it's about the same thing that you're recording your audio podcast for. So how can we do this and optimize it? And at what level? Well, if you're recording a Zoom conversation or something on Descript Rooms or Squadcast or something that's already recording video anyway, if your guest, for example, has a webcam, well, you might as well just hit record on that, not just for the audio, but for the video as well, and then publish it on YouTube that way. Other people go as far as actually creating a studio to then bring guests in and have a very nice setup, clean with all the lights and everything, perfect sound, perfect set, and then record that podcast. You might have seen, Chris Williamson or the Joe Rogan Show. I mean, these are video podcasts that kind of put video podcasts on the map. Again, a question we should always go to when we're starting out something like this is, if this were easy, what would it look like? Well, you would just record the videos that you're already recording during those interviews and or solo shows. Maybe you just turn the camera on or turn your phone on in horizontal mode. You just are speaking into the lens and microphone at the same time. Then that just becomes the video. Now, there's, of course, a number of different elements here with the YouTube platform. In fact, we teach YouTube itself, in addition to teaching podcasting in the SPI community, in 2 separate courses. And this is like combining those 2 things in one. So if you're a part of the SPI community, you definitely want to take advantage of both of that. But I would say that YouTube comes with its own understanding and tips and tricks and kind of best practices, right? Titles and thumbnails are really key. We didn't talk about thumbnails for individual episodes with the audio only show, but it is massively important. I would say just as important as the episode itself, because if people aren't clicking into that video, then they are never going to listen to any of your episode or watch any of the video that you've created. So the title and thumbnail is really key. On YouTube, in terms of YouTube consumption behavior, the hook is even more important. So you'll want to capture attention in the first 5 seconds or else people are out, because unlike an audio show, on YouTube itself, there's distractions. There's other recommended videos. There's a way to exit that platform really quickly. With audio only, there's not really that many distractions visually. People have that phone in their pocket or on their, in their cup holder in their car, and then they're just listening to you, right? So there's a lot of different elements here, which is why my recommendation would actually be to start with the audio only podcast. If you wanted to simplify this and take it in stages, start with the audio only show with Buzzsprout. You're uploading your episodes to Buzzsprout and they're getting distributed out to the different platforms. And then once you get those systems down, once you get the rhythm and you optimize and you get some time back, you can put that additional time or effort and resources into the video component of that. Now, I would record those videos that you record initially, even though you're not going to use them up front, just so you have them and you can edit them or hire somebody to edit them later. And there's also a lot of other tools that you can use as well. This is the other component of this. Maybe you actually don't publish the full episodes, but because you have the videos, you can actually chop up that longer video into smaller videos for social media. And guess what? Buzzsprout has a tool that enables you to do that. So again, that's kind of built into the Pro plan there, which is really nice. There's other tools like Opus Clip and several others that will automatically do that for you as well. Descript can do that too, but all that to say, you can use these little clips, post them on social media to then bring more awareness to your show and hopefully get more people to find you and also find your audio podcast from there. And then later down the road, if you choose to add it, your video podcasts too. So that's a lot to think about. You have some decisions to make now. But the most important decision I want you to make is to go to smartpassiveincome.com/podcast cheat sheet. So you can get your cheat sheet and have the whole checklist of things that we talked about today so you can follow along. You can rewatch this video, pause as we go, and definitely be sure to sign up to Buzzsprout. smartpassiveincome.com/Buzzsprout is the place you want to go. And I want to wish you the best. I cannot wait to hear about your show. And if you have one already or you set one up, leave me a comment with your show name and just a 1-sentence description of it, because I want to get excited about different shows to listen to. And hopefully we can start you on your path to success with a podcast, your business. Maybe it's a video podcast too here on YouTube. I don't know. I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments. Best of luck. Again, podcast cheat sheet, smartpassiveincome.com/podcast cheat sheet. All the links you need are below. Good luck.